What's up, y'all? I'm Gabe, and this is everything I watched this month, June edition. Alright, first up is Robert Rodriguez's Hypnotic, and I just gotta say that this movie massively disappointed me. I thought it was gonna be some sort of mix between an action, thriller, heist movie, but it just turns into a mess, expositional dump garbage as soon as they start divulging information about the hypnotists. Now, of course, the action scenes are cool, the cinematography's fine, and the characters are stacked with good actors. But as soon as the hypnotists start, it's like the same feeling you get when watching time travel movies, where it's like, if they can do this, why don't they just do this? But they just make it overly complicated for no reason. Of course, I also got to mention a much better movie than this is just Inception. This movie kind of feels like it's Inception's little brother who just never got good grades, never performed nearly as well, and it's just sitting there in the back of the classroom eating a bunch of rocks while the teacher's lecturing. Next up, I watched Blackberry by Matt Johnson, and I've got to say, this is a fantastic movie. Biopics, especially because of this movie, have risen to the top of my favorite categories to watch in movies, just because it does such an accurate portrayal of what actually happened while immersing myself and all the other audience members into that generation. Of course, the 80s was a pretty long time ago now, and being able to have something that can put yourself in his shoes and see the insight as to why they made the decisions that they did is just great nowadays. On top of that, I have to say I would be shocked if Glenn Howerton did not get an Oscar from his performance in this movie, because he does a fantastic job at portraying that dick, being that guy that says, I don't care what you do, you're gonna shut up, listen to me, and we're gonna make money, being all confident, especially to the other characters' counterparts who are all shy. This movie does a fantastic job of displaying those character traits and why we root for the characters that we do. Next up, I watched The Number 23 by Joel Schumacher, featuring Jim Carrey. And the main thing that I gotta say about this movie that I didn't like was just the overcomplicated nature of how they received The Number 23. Some stuff makes sense. Jim Carrey's birthday, February 3rd. His license plate has 986, that adds up to 23. But there's one character that purposely says something so complicated like, oh, red plus white, that equals pink. Pink has 4 letters. Those 4 letters add up to 23. And I'm like, what are you even doing? Now that is just insane. But some good things about the movie was the plot twist I really didn't see coming, how Jim Carrey was the one who did it all. Of course, we've all seen that before many times, where it's your protagonist is the one who done it. But I think they really executed it properly. Especially the characters acting, this is one thing I miss. A lot of the movies that I'm watching nowadays, the actors are just acting really badly. Their dialogue is trash. But in this movie, I feel like there's not a minute wasted of time. So even though I didn't like it too much, I still definitely would suggest it as a good watch. Next up, I watched Jury Duty, and I thought this show was great, except just overhyped. Because every single person that I saw was rating the show 10 out of 10, and that just doesn't fit right for me. Personally, yes, it is funny, but to me, I didn't even laugh that much for the first 5 episodes, mainly the last 3, just because personally I thought they were just setting up more stuff to come. But I gotta say, I understand the hype because the characters' relationships between each other was fantastic, and their chemistry between each other was amazing. It really got me invested in each of their stories, especially, of course, Ronald. And I really liked being able to see what someone would do if they got put into a position. Now, I gotta say, I especially love the finale because seeing Ronald's face when all the producers and the actors say, hey, we're actors, here's everything we did to stop you from finding out just to see what you would do, that was super funny. I really enjoyed the finale because of it. Next up, I finally finished Suits, the show. I've been watching that for a long time, but I had to put it off because it just got so boring towards the later seasons. And that's my biggest complaint, is that out of the 9 seasons, you could probably cut out 5 seasons, 4 or 5 seasons, and you wouldn't even notice a thing. Because personally, only the first 3 seasons and the last 2 are of importance. Because in the middle stretch, it just gets kind of boring, especially after Jessica and Mike leave. Then it just sits there kind of boring because instead of focusing that 45-minute episode on 15 minutes Mike, 15 minutes Harvey, 15 minutes someone else, it's all 45 Harvey. And that gets a little kind of boring, especially when we've seen the same crap over and over. Harvey goes to bully someone, they bend to the knee, and then boom, he gets what they want. And the only arguments that anybody has, or the only fights that people get into, is when someone goes to sue the firm. But guess what? We've already seen that so many times. So if they cut out more of the seasons, I think it would be a much better show. Next up, I watched Flamin' Hot by Eva Longoria, and I thought this movie was great. It's another biopic that's there to watch. Now, of course, there's some biopics like Blackberry that are better, but this still provides everything that I like in a biopic. We got Richard, who's doing a fantastic job as the main protagonist, and I think he's one of the few characters that can actually pull off that narration while characters are doing stuff, because a lot of times it just seems awkward and clunky to add that in post. And of course, Judy as well is doing a fantastic job as the wife, being that supportive, oh my god, how are we gonna pay for our bills, but still at the same time loving her husband. And my by far the favorite part of this movie for me was Clarence. His actor did a fantastic job as being that bro that you can just come to talk about whatever you need, and he's the one that eventually gets Richard to push to contact the director, the CEO, and give that idea. And I thought they did a fantastic job with those sequences after, when Richard goes to talk with the CEO, but they don't listen. But then turns out they were just doing marketing wrong, and boom, then he gets head of multicultural marketing. I thought they did a fantastic job with that. Next up, I watched Beau is Afraid by Ari Aster, featuring Joaquin Phoenix, and I thought this movie did a great job. I mean, carried so hard by Joaquin's acting, because there isn't much dialogue in this movie, and a lot of it focuses on the paranoia of his character. And so being able to show emotions with only your face and body language without actually talking is a very tough skill as an actor to master. And we know Joaquin Phoenix, especially after Joker, is able to pull that off perfectly. Now, especially his mother, I think she's a fantastic job at showing that manipulative nature that some people just overlook in abusive relationships because they don't see it as physical, so there isn't really anything to tell. She definitely is the star of this movie, even though she's only in it for around 30 minutes. The only critique I have of this movie is that it's a little bit too long. Some of the sequences could easily have been cut down, but overall, I can't complain much because of that. Next up, I watched Nefarious, featuring Sean Patrick Flanery and Jordan Belfort. And the big problem I have with this movie is just the fact that so many movies do this exact same premise, but much better. One example that I think of is Primal Fear with Edward Norton. Both of these movies involve one person who's claiming to be insane in order to not die, basically, so that they can continue murdering. And in this case, when 90% of the movie focuses on sole conversations between the two main protagonists, it gives less time between to actually flesh out the plot. So a lot of the time, it's just Sean going from demon mode to insane, stupid baby. Because in one instance, he's talking perfectly articulate, quoting quotes from the Bible to show how he's a demon, telling Jordan that he's gonna murder a bunch of people. And then 2 seconds later, he turns into Edward and he's like, "Why didn't you give me my ice cream? I'm so sad." And especially the switch wasn't good enough in order for me to stay invested in the movie. It just really took me out of it. A good example of a better movie is Primal Fear in every single way. So if you really want to watch this type of movie, just watch Primal Fear instead. Next up, I watched The Bear Season 2. And yes, I binged it all in one day, because that's how good this show is. It's always leaving me on a cliffhanger, like I have to watch the next episode. First, this show is one of the only few cooking shows that I've actually seen where it feels like it's a restaurant environment, with chaos, yelling, fighting, while still trying to at least fake it till you make it to make the customers seem like everything's under control. The only problem with the show is that right in the middle of it, there's an hour-long stretch episode where the acting is so phenomenal by the whole entire family that it makes me just want to follow Jeremy White and keep my head down the entire time, with how crazy and chaotic and awkward it is. The season just takes the first season and kicks it up a notch by fleshing out the characters more, making it more chaotic, which seems crazy, especially after watching the season 1 finale, and adding more stakes to everything all the characters do, and the journey we follow those characters through is fantastic. We really get to know the characters more and develop more feelings towards them, And the show is so underrated that I hear no one talking about it, so I can't keep recommending it enough to anybody who wants to watch a good cooking show. Next up is Over the Garden Wall, and I just have to say that the story of the show is unmatched for a kid's cartoon. I was surprised that I missed this show when it originally aired in Cartoon Network, but now that I've watched it, I've grown a fond appreciation for it. It's able to tell a compelling and detailed story in just 10 episodes, each around 10 minutes long, where TV shows nowadays take multiple seasons just to tell that same compelling story, where this show does it in record time. Along with that, the characters are extremely compelling, relatable, and their design is incredible. I was especially surprised by Greg, the little brother's performance, by demonstrating that the child's young, blissful nature while still tackling some complicated topics. It even made me laugh more than some comedies out right now. Along with that, the atmosphere and world building really makes me want to revisit this show or any project similar that would have came after it. Shocked that it only got one season with how good of a show it is. Along with that, the penultimate episode did a fantastic job at revealing the mystery of what actually happened to them and why. Next up, I watched Silo, and this series I can tell is Apple TV's way of saying we are part of the streaming wars, take us seriously. With how much good stuff this show has to offer, I don't disagree with that statement at all. One thing I gotta applaud is the fact that in almost every scenario that happens as Rebecca is solving the mysteries of the silo, it feels like that would actually happen if someone was placed in the scenario. They provide a great amount of background details in order to help immerse us into the world while keeping it interesting and still leaving mysteries for us to solve as the audience. I'm currently on a rewatch of the show, and it's nice to see all the things they do to foreshadow the twists and turns of the show. Of course, I can't forget that their acting is phenomenal, especially between the relationships of all the characters that Rebecca interacts with. The plot moves forward beautifully without giving the audience that sense of, oh, there would be no way she would figure that out in real life. And the cliffhangers constantly kept me eager to wait and watch the next few episodes. And especially that final season 1 cliffhanger was insane, and I'm already counting down the days till we get season 2. After that, I watched The Big Short, and first off, the cast is stacked with Ryan Gosling, Steve Carell, Christian Bale, Brad Pitt, and more. And they do a fantastic job at explaining what happened into a topic most of us care relatively little about and know relatively little about. I especially love the scenes where they take celebrities to explain certain difficult aspects of the subject matter to encourage the audience to actually learn what they're talking about. Christian Bale and Steve Carell definitely carry this movie with their acting skills. Their performances and the writing was fantastic. It makes us feel like we're actually there back when the crash happened. Now, I love the writing as well in how they dumb it down for the audiences to make it more understandable. The biggest flaw for this movie for me, which is why I think this movie is extremely overrated, is the fact that the direction and style of this movie just makes it feel like unprofessional. And I understand why they did it. It's to simulate what it was like during that time, but it just kind of feels like a gimmick to me with how frequently they use those editing styles. Next up, I watched The Intern and Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. And both of these movies I can say are great watches if you want just a comfort movie that will warm your heart, and you also don't have to pay much attention to. With The Intern, it focuses on Robert De Niro's journey into working for Anne Hathaway, and their chemistry is definitely the best part of the movie. De Niro is so inviting where you just want him in as your own grandpa, and even though Anne Hathaway is uptight, she loosens up throughout the movie, and it makes it more interesting, that arc that she goes through. The main problem for me is that the story forces the characters to do stuff rather than the other way around. The script says De Niro needs to do this, and so he'll do it. It doesn't feel as though the characters' choices are driving the story. Now with Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, instead of focusing on the relationship between father-daughter pair, it focuses on Margaret's relationship with her parents, grandparents, and especially religion. And that latter aspect is where it excels. The film is a great coming-of-age film for Margaret in dealing with puberty and becoming an adult, when she searches for religion, and adds depth to the movie and layers that I have never seen before, making it more interesting. But when it isn't talking about that, it kind of falls into those other coming-of-age films that we've seen many times before. Both of the movies, like I said, are great watches if you just want to put something on, and they'll make your heart glow after watching them. The final movie that I watched this month was Extraction 2. And I gotta say, if I rated movies solely on action, then this movie would be up there with the likes of John Wick, The Raid, Kill Bill, etc. Especially with the prison scene, considering that was almost like the entire marketing for this movie was fantastic. It essentially takes the first Extraction movie and just ups the antes with more guns, explosions, and fights, which is all choreographed beautifully. The only gripes I have with this movie is the story is just extremely lackluster, and Sandro is definitely going to become top 10 hated characters with the ignorant stunt he pulled, killing more innocent people and basically dragging along the entire movie. But as I mentioned before, the prison scene was fantastic. It was, what, 20 minutes of just uncut, raw, one take style, and I love those. Especially after watching John Wick 4, that's something that this movie does extremely well. And of course, the train fight scene and the final fights are all amazing in its own right. Like I said, if this movie I was rating based on just action alone, it would probably be like a 9.5. But I have to take it down a couple notches just because of the story and the plot. Alright, and that's everything I watched in June. I just want to say, if you're still here, thanks for watching. And if you guys have any movie or TV show recommendations, drop it down in the comments and I'll be sure to get to it. Now, if you guys like this video, make sure to hit that like and subscribe for more content later down this road. Bye, guys.